There are two scenes in particular in the movie that I absolutely loathe. And if you've seen the movie, I'm sure you hated them as well. Actually, there are three, but the entire finale of the movie can hardly be described as a scene. Let's get started. Hi everyone, my name is Pat, and today I'm gonna take a look at the 2022 Hellraiser Reboot. I thought rebooting the franchise for a new generation was a splendid idea. After all, Pinhead and the Cenobites are established characters in pop culture and get parodied left and right. I enjoyed the designs and high quality costumes. In general, all the design elements like the cube and its forms were intriguing and appealing. And on that note, the sacrifice and wish granting system were a welcome new addition to the franchise in the hopes of adding more depth to the lore, but it turned out to be a double-edged sword and only aided in the movie's downfall rather than elevating it. I do want to clarify that I'm not well versed when it comes to the Hellraiser lore, nor have I ever been particular fond of the franchise. I've seen the first movie and read the book Hellbound Heart a long time ago, but that's about it. With that said, let's move on to the bad bits. Let me be frank, the movie was boring. For me personally, it failed to rouse any type of fear or suspense. Not a single worthwhile idea was explored. If I had to describe the movie, I'd call it an interdimensional slasher flick with neat costumes and effects. Maybe I'm just jaded to the horror genre in general by now, because when Halloween comes around, I do watch my fair share of horror movies. But this movie in particular felt uninteresting. There are a few reasons why, and maybe you as well might have felt that way. Firstly, I thought the main character was uninteresting and outright obnoxious. I did not care whether she lived or died. Her only defining character trait was her drug abuse. And then she just went around and discovered what she needed to when she needed to. In general, I perceived all characters to be one-dimensional. One attribute is enough to describe each one of them, like walking plot armor, the villain, the trader, the diversity checklist, the cannon fodder, and that's about all of them. Another big thing was the protagonist's lack of and subsequently forced motivation. When her brother disappeared, she started to obsess about the cube in an unnatural manner, rather than investigating his disappearance. I'd understand it if the trader coaxed and persuaded her into pursuing leads regarding the cube to take her mind off her brother's death, or something like that, but instead he actively dissuaded her from pursuing it.
We need to get rid of that thing, Riley.
Trevor, what the fuck are you doing?
I'm tossing this thing, alright? No one's gonna know the difference.
Which is odd and conflicting regarding the purpose of his character.
All you have to do is feed the box.
Eventually, she comes across the cube's ability to resurrect her brother, which should have strengthened her resolve, but instead halted it.
No, I've done enough.
This was a bad direction to take the movie in, because now you've essentially halted the movie from progressing. I felt like choosing a storyline paralleling Julia's from the original movie, where she killed to resurrect Frank, could have been used here to some extent. I'll elaborate on that thought later on. And with that said, the protagonist's choice to stop her quest brings us to the first displeasing scene. When Pinhead controlled the cube and made the choice for the protagonist, I was immensely displeased. This scene caused the Cenobites to switch from a passive observer role to that of an active participant. Allowing the Cenobites to interact at their own discretion made the cube's gimmick obsolete. Furthermore, they now favored the player and gave her preferential treatment. Remember when I said the plot stopped progressing? The story hinges on so many Hail Mary moments, it doesn't feel like a story unfolding, but a series of unlikely events happening. The overall premise isn't bad, but poorly executed at every twist and turn. Conflicts drive a story, and in storytelling there are two types, internal and external conflicts. An external conflict is an outward obstacle the protagonist must overcome, a physical roadblock. An internal conflict is a choice that needs to be made where the protagonist's personal beliefs and or worldviews are challenged. In this particular case, it's whether she should continue killing to resurrect her brother. This internal conflict was skipped because of Pinhead's intervention. Now the protagonist was forced to kill her friends then and there to survive. I've always seen the Cenobites as being impartial beings whose purpose is to grant extraordinary pleasure to those who seek it, almost like a genie. I really felt like a storyline concerning a moral dilemma of whom to kill was buried here somewhere, where the protagonist could have chosen to kill people she deemed unworthy of living. Imagine a scene at the beginning where we get to see her homosexual brother being discriminated against and assaulted by a homophobe. After the brother's disappearance, she encounters the bully again and sees him continuing to discriminate against others. She chooses to kill him and starts to find pleasure in punishing the guilty to resurrect her brother. A scene like this doesn't just introduce a thought-provoking moral conflict for the audience to judge the protagonist on, but elevates her brother's homosexuality from being a box to tick into a meaningful plot point and catalyst to the story. It also brings it closer to the original theme of seeking and finding extreme pleasures. In my scenario, it's finding pleasure in extraordinary masochism. Hellraiser's theme of a twisted sense of pleasure and pain is mostly absent in the movie, except for the saw contraption, which I think is a neat idea, but yet again poorly executed. But I digress. Anyway, at this point in the movie, the protagonist was faced with an internal conflict: kill people to resurrect her brother or leave him for dead. The movie gave her an out, she chose to get out, and of course that's boring. Therefore, Pinhead had to intervene and rope her back in. This led us to the second scene in the movie I despised. By default, the protagonist is a good girl. By accident, she discovers that she can pass on the choice of sacrifice to someone else, and not just anyone else, but the Cenobites themselves as well. Being marked as a sacrifice is essentially a game of hot potato.
Potato, hot potato, pass the hot potato, stop!
This loophole allows her to maintain her boring good girl persona, where she doesn't have to waste a single thought on the repercussions of her actions. What's worse, even the Cenobites heavily support her by allowing the character to keep up the good girl charade. When the brother's boyfriend gets chosen, through their biased actions and behavior, they offer her to exchange him for her own treacherous boyfriend. They even chose the villain for her as the last victim to neatly wrap things up. The blatant favoritism was so frustrating to watch. The protagonist was excluded from any moral repercussions because the movie offered her a bunch of convenient outs. And not just that, the Cenobites did the heavy lifting for her. Only one who got shafted was her brother's friend A with her 1 minute of screen time. To sum it up, the story is incredibly restricted, allowing the protagonist only to act a certain way, if at all. There is no illusion of choice. She has to act unnaturally to connect one plot point to the next, or there would be no movie. And it's very evident throughout the movie, especially right before her brother dies. After her brother's death, there is no mourning period, no funeral, nothing of any kind to decelerate the story. Instead, she draws unfounded conclusions about the cube being responsible for his disappearance and almost immediately starts obsessing about it and fiddling with it. Realistically, people would try to look for more grounded reasons for the disappearance and not jump straight to supernatural conclusions. The overarching motivation to stay engaged with the cube and the Cenobites is to resurrect her brother, but that concrete motivation still lies way down the line, forcing the movie to fast track to that point clumsily. The movie failed to set up a key element of storytelling, believable character motivation. A simple solution would have been to have an incomplete journal depicting the cube's formations, accompanying it when they first found it. Similar to what Ryuk did in the Death Note anime. He wrote instructions into the notebook to pique the curiosity of the finder and coerce them into using the Death Note. The cube's purpose should have been explained earlier, like how it cycles through the formations and how a sacrifice is needed to enter the next formation. And while it does exist, it is directly targeted at the audience and not the characters within the world. Even if she didn't believe it at first, having it would have lent her obsession much needed credence. If you think about it a little too hard, you realize the whole setup with the safe and the theft was asinine. If the end goal was to just find someone who fiddles with the cube, a crook who wants to peddle the loot isn't the best of choices. It should have been sold to an antiquities dealer or hobby cryptologist, basically people with a genuine interest to solve it. And once they've solved it, all you needed to do is retrieve the cube. It's difficult to pinpoint where things fall apart because the idea is badly constructed and executed from the get-go. The plot points serve their purpose whether they fit the part or not. How does the movie get her to fiddle with the cube? A random fight with her brother and taking a few drugs should do the trick. Am I right? Not really, no. She is penniless and just became homeless. Fiddling with the cube is the least of her concerns. As I mentioned in the beginning, the character was boring because she's literally a random character. She doesn't fit the intended role. In comparison, Death Note's Yagami Light was the most absurdly perfect character to find the Death Note. With his ideals, intellect and resources, he was the perfect driving force to advance the story in an although outrageous, still somewhat believable way. In the Hellraiser reboot, we got a random thief who does the random right things because otherwise there'd be no movie. This just goes to show how much more thought went into creating Death Note as opposed to this reboot. Other things I thought were questionable were why a villain existed, why did he build a cage, and why would you reveal that the rewards are Faustian bargains before reaching the end. The story has just so many plot points that end in cul-de-sacs. Even the finale is underwhelmingly anticlimactic, where she denies her prize without any consequences.
No, I don't want anything from you. Nothing.
You have chosen the lament configuration.
Why force her to progress if getting out of the deal is possible? Pinhead's actions were a literal exercise in futility. Everything that happens in this movie is absolutely meaningless. Usually in this chapter, I rearrange, expand or cut parts of the story to improve on the flaws I elaborated on, but in this case it's rather difficult. There aren't just one or two major flaws, but many major and minor issues. These issues range from a bad initial setup, flawed main concept, uninteresting characters and albeit interesting, badly executed subplots, all the way to the Cenobites playing favorites and supporting their favorite character, which causes them not to be scary at all, but rather helpful instead. In order to make the movie work, it needs to be reworked from the ground up, starting with the main concept. concept. If really all you need is someone to solve the puzzle, put up a Craigslist ad saying you inherited a puzzle, whoever manages to solve it gets $250 in cash. Trust me, broke people will show up in spades. The concept should have been a binding contract with a time limit between sacrifices that needs to be abided by or you get taken instead. If done this way, it removes the choice to stop whenever you want and ensures that the movie keeps progressing without having to rely on outside intervention. It also adds urgency through an organic timer and provides motivation to keep progressing, survival. But by changing the hand-off rule, the movie can no longer play out as it did. Here's an idea of how I would have changed the setting. I'd stick to a sibling pair, a brother and sister, where the brother is a hobby historian, archaeologist or some such. One day, after behaving strangely for a week, he disappears without a trace. When his sister investigates his sudden disappearance, she comes across a safe in his study. Due to them being close, she figures out the combination and manages to unlock the safe. Inside it, she finds information about the cube and the cube already in its second form. While examining the cube, she cuts herself on it, creating a new contract and reverting the cube to its first form. She's now contractually bound to lure other pleasure seekers into the realm of the Cenobites in order to get her desire granted, kinda how the villain did it. If the protagonist is portrayed as a timid pushover at first who's forced out of her comfort zone in order to survive and coerce other victims, you get nice character development out of it as well. There are a plethora of plotlines one can adapt from here on out. For example, the protagonist finds pleasure in coercing crooks to sacrifice until she's forced to get rid of an innocent person, perhaps an investigator who's investigating the missing people, a close friend, or a love interest. Once she's done, the Cenobites might give her a Faustian bargain regarding her brother's resurrection, causing her to turn against them instead. There are a lot of curveballs you can throw at a story like that, which also makes better use of its original theme, extreme forms of pleasure and desire, rather than just a boring slasher flick. As you can tell, I was sorely disappointed in the movie. The characters and plot were forgettable. It's pleasant to look at but boring to experience. I've always thought that Hellraiser's concept of seeking the ultimate pleasure beyond one's imagination is intriguing. It's an idea with lots of conflict potential. It challenges the idea of everything is fine as long as it's exercised in moderation, as well as questioning vices and virtues. With that said, I can't wait for it to be rebooted in the next 10 years or so, and I hope it will be more successful then. Anyways, that's it from me regarding Hellraiser. What did you guys think of it? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Or do you think I'm wrong? Share your opinions in the comments down below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you'd like to see more, watch some of my other stuff and sub to the channel while you're at it. I'd appreciate that. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you again.